Storytime about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. I'm 24 years old and my boyfriend is 21. According to him, he has never been with any girl who's had cellulite before, or even an ounce of body fat. Yes, I know what you're thinking, he's a total asshole, which in that sense, he is. But the rest of the time, he's completely fine and actually sweet. We met last year at a friend's party. At the party, I instantly fell in love with him. I thought he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And it was reciprocated. I saw him from across the room and he made eye contact. A few minutes later, he walked over to me and just struck up a conversation. I know that people present themselves the way they want to be seen, especially when they're trying to impress someone they're attracted to. He started telling me about how he's studying to be a doctor, how he volunteers at animal shelters, and that every single weekend he also volunteers at the soup kitchen. Everything he said was absolutely perfect. By the end of the night, he had asked me out on a date and I said yes. I did explain to him that I didn't want anything serious and he said that was totally fine. I was trying to focus on my studies, so having a boyfriend was not in my plans. But after we went on 7 dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He wouldn't take no for an answer. After about a month, I finally said yes. Mind you, at this point, he hadn't seen me naked, not even in a bathing suit. The very night that I said yes to being his girlfriend, he asked me to come over to his place. We made a whole gourmet dinner, even bought super expensive wine. So we ended up doing it for the first time that night. The next morning when I woke up, the first thing he said to me was, "Do you ever exercise?" I was shocked. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimers are not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said point blank, super serious, "Do you ever exercise?" I just stared at him. I had literally just woken up in his bed after the first time we ever did it. Then I thought he must be joking. So I started to laugh a little, and then he says, "No, seriously, do you ever exercise?" I said, "Sometimes." Then he told me, "You should really try to work out at least 5 times a week." I went home and finally texted him saying that I wasn't comfortable with the way he spoke to me. That's when he said that what he said to me was completely normal, and that I shouldn't be offended. This was all in text, by the way. That's when he sends me another text message saying, "You know, you wouldn't have as much cellulite as you do if you didn't eat so much fast food. And if you exercise 5 times a week like I told you." I didn't reply to him for the rest of the day. Later that day, he shows up to my apartment and says, "You know, I should feel comfortable enough to tell you what I think about you." He somehow ended up making me feel bad and I ended up apologizing. Obviously, after that, I became really self-conscious about my cellulite and my entire body. So anytime we were together, I would always stay under the covers. By the way, my boyfriend doesn't have a great body. He's super soft and pudgy. Last week, he told me that he had abs though. Part 3. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. One day he pulls up his shirt and says, "Look, I have abs." Which no, he doesn't. He's super soft and has a thick layer of fat on it. I smirked and he said, "What?" And I said, "You don't have abs." Then he says, "Yes, I do. I'm in better shape than you." By the way, he said this in front of his friends, so I was super embarrassed and stayed quiet the entire day. He finally went to drop me off and I was so happy to be home. But he decided to come upstairs with me. Got straight into my PJs. And when I came out of my bedroom, he says, "Wow, your cellulite's getting worse by the day." That's when I finally broke. I turned around and started yelling at him. I told him he had no right to talk about my body the way that he did, and that all he does is objectify me. He started laughing and said, "Wow, those are big words." And that when we met, he thought that I was in better shape. My clothes obviously tricked him. I'm 5'4" and I weigh 130 pounds. I am by no means fat, but the way that he was bullying me was making me think that I was. That's when I told him that he was the fat one, and that he had a big, huge beer belly. I also told him that his face was super round, but that didn't bother me. Oh yeah, and that his hairy back was gross. Then he said, "Wow, I can't believe you're attacking my physical appearance." Then he stormed out of my apartment, and as soon as he left, I felt happy. We haven't spoken in 4 days. I'm afraid that if he asks me to get back with him, I will. But I should just break up with him, right? What should I do?
Am I wrong for losing it on my fiance for disinviting my stepsister from our wedding? I'm gonna keep it short. I, female 25, am getting married to my fiance next month. We've had no issues with the wedding planning except the guest list. Context: I have a large family. I have 2 stepsisters, 18, 20, and a biological brother, 27, and also a biological sister, 30. My fiance argued that the guest list should be cut short and suggested I only invite my immediate family. I asked him to elaborate, and he suggested excluding my stepsisters. I said no and got upset with him for implying that they're not family, and he said, "Well, this wasn't what I meant. I was just speaking from a technical angle, especially since I didn't include them in my wedding party like maid of honor and bridesmaids." So he thought they were unneeded, but I said that they were wanted and will always be wanted and included by me. Well, days ago, my stepsisters called me saying my fiance canceled their invitations and told them some lie about changing wedding location and telling them they won't be able to come. I was fuming. I went home and started screaming at him. He asked that I hear him out, then explained he had no choice since we were required to shorten the list and just did my dirty work for me since I obviously was just looking at the situation from an emotional angle and couldn't bring myself to disinvite my stepsisters myself. I called him a hypocrite because he invited almost 6 of his family friends who, as far as I know, aren't immediate family. I told him he hurt my stepsisters by going behind my back and excluding them from my wedding, which they've been excited about. He got up from the couch and yelled that it's our wedding, so my stepsisters' feelings aren't really that relevant compared to his, and he called me controlling for wanting my way or the highway. He took his phone and stormed off to see his friends. Some of his friends called to scold me for how I'm treating their brother, and then went on about how rude I was to suggest that their brother disinvite them from the wedding just because I don't like them and called it a "you problem." My future mother-in-law called and is wanting to speak to me. He probably told her what's going on and she's probably going to ask that I apologize for yelling. So, oh my god, please don't marry this dude. What the heck? You guys aren't even married. Look how much he's gaslighting you. Get out of here.
Am I the asshole for telling my dying son his dad is leaving me? I, 53 female, have a son, 26 male, with my soon-to-be ex-husband, 50 male. My dear son has a terminal illness and has transitioned from palliative care to hospice care. Needless to say, we're all devastated and have been hiding our separation from him. Unfortunately, the pressure of caring for our son and manipulation from a neighbor led me to a one night of indiscretion, and now my husband wants a divorce. He told me he wouldn't file until after our son passes away, and I was appreciative about this at first. But now I'm rethinking this and told him if he's not man enough to fight for the best thing that's ever happened to him, then I would tell our son that his dad is leaving me. My husband and our entire extended family are lining up and begging me not to do it. They said this news would devastate him in his final weeks, and he doesn't have to find out. But it doesn't feel right to lie to him. He's a young man who should be treated with dignity while he's here. He deserves the truth, and to know that his dad is giving up on our family. He doesn't need to be lied to and coddled like a child. I've already made up my mind, and that unless my husband agrees to counseling and to not file for divorce by tomorrow, I'm telling our son the truth so we can all have closure. It's his family too, and he should know that his dad is about to rip it apart.
Where is the accountability here?
There is none.
None.
There is absolutely none.
This is a narcissist. I mean, this sounds like a very narcissistic thing to do.
I know, and we really have tried not to throw that around. Like, we really evaluated how much we were saying it. Like, we try not to throw that around, but like this is...
I haven't said that word in a long time.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we've tried, we
okay.
really like not said it. And I think you are potentially right. Like, there is no insight into anyone but herself. Mm-hmm. He's willing to throw away the best thing that's ever happened to him. He's not willing to fight for us. Ma'am, you had an affair.
Well, exactly.
My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer's not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I know you guys are gonna all say yes immediately, but hear me out. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 6 months. My best friend and I actually met him at a bar. That night, I never expected that he would ever come after me. I consider my best friend the prettier of the two of us, so I'm used to her getting hit on instead of me. But that night, my boyfriend came to me. He talked to me pretty much the entire night, and my best friend told me to go for it. So I did. He and I spent the night together, and after that, we were inseparable. To the point where he wanted me to move in with him after 2 months. My parents thought I was absolutely crazy and they didn't want me to move in with him, but I did anyway. I come from a Latino family, so this was absolutely reprehensible. I went against my family's wishes and they actually stopped speaking to me for a little bit, but luckily I got them back. My boyfriend during that time gave me all his support. He told me that my family would come around eventually and that they would see that we were in love. So living together was the logical next step. After 3 months of living together, I knew that I wanted to marry him, and he would talk about marriage all the time. He asked me what kind of ring I would want and what I would want for the proposal. We even started talking about our honeymoon. I was also starting to get in the best shape of my life. I was looking super snatched. My boyfriend told me that he loved the way that I look, but that he didn't want me to get skinny. Again, I just felt like he was supporting me and loving me. Around this time, my best friend started dating somebody. After a few weeks, they got really serious about the relationship. And of course, we went on double dates. After the third double date, I noticed that my boyfriend was getting a little annoyed. I got the feeling he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend. Follow for part 2. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer's not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I asked him if he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend, and that's when he said no. But every time we would go on double dates, he would get in such a bad mood. 3 weeks ago, my best friend told me that she was moving in with her boyfriend. And when I told my boyfriend that they were moving in, his face almost went green. I asked him what was wrong, and he said nothing. After that, he went into the bathroom and didn't come out for 40 minutes. Again, I asked him if he was okay, and he said yeah. And I sat him down and asked him to be honest with me. That's when he said, I'm attracted to your best friend. Instantly started to cry because I had already been suspecting it. He explained to me that he didn't have any feelings for her until she got a boyfriend, and that he felt that he had some sort of ownership over her. Before my best friend got a boyfriend, the three of us would hang out a lot. And not once then did I ever get a feeling that he was attracted to her. He told me that he would never act on his feelings, but he didn't want to go on any more double dates. I asked him if he wanted to be with her instead of me, and he said absolutely not. He said that I was the love of his life and that attraction only meant attraction, that he didn't have feelings for her. A few days later, he took me to the most expensive restaurant in our city and asked me to marry him. But I didn't know what to say. I can't stop thinking that he's attracted to my best friend. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. Sending me on Instagram. After he proposed, I told him I didn't know what to say. He told me to think it over. I finally decided to tell my best friend what my boyfriend had told me. That he had confessed that he was attracted to her. First she laughed. I told her no. I'm serious. He confessed that he's attracted to you. That's when she told me I needed to break up with him. That's when I told her that he had also proposed. And she said, well then you really need to break up with him now. That's when she told me that she didn't want me to resent her and that it was completely out of her control. And I didn't. I promised her that I would never resent her for my boyfriend being attracted to her. It's not like she ever did anything on purpose to make him feel attracted. He also told me that marrying him right now would be rushing into it. And she's kind of right. We've only really known each other for 6 months. Then she told me that she's never gotten the feeling that he's attracted to her. She's never caught him looking at her or anything like that. So now her theory is that he's looking for an easy way out and that he probably wants me to break up with him. But my boyfriend is still sweet and super affectionate. He's constantly showering me with love. My best friend thinks that if I stay with him, our relationship will suffer. I've known my best friend longer. What should I do?
Am I wrong for not telling my husband I went into labor? I, 32 female, have 3 kids. K, 12 female, L, 4 female, and I just gave birth to my beautiful baby girl, Valerie. My husband and I have been married for 5 years, and I love him, but he's a little bit of a mama's boy. My mother-in-law hates me. I grew up in a richer neighborhood, and my parents left me with quite a lot of inheritance when they passed, about $13 million in assets. Mother-in-law, however, was a single mother with 2 sons and had a lot of trouble just paying for basic needs. She worked her way up, and I think she's very strong. She doesn't like me and thinks I'm pretentious because apparently I had everything handed to me. Well, when I got pregnant with Elle, we decided to name him Luke, after my husband's father, who died when my husband was only 3. Mother-in-law was through the roof when we told her, but ever since I fell pregnant again with Valerie, she has been adamant that we would name her Francine after her late grandmother. My husband wants to as well, but I don't. Instead, I wanted to name her Valerie, and not just because I like the name, but also because when I was 17, the song Valerie by Amy Winehouse came out, and me and my family would sing it all the time. At family gatherings, it was always first on the speaker, car rides, and just in general. It was basically our song. Well, my older sister and my parents passed away in a house fire 3 years ago, and I miss them terribly. We were all a very close family, so it hit me and my younger sister very hard. When I suggested this to my husband and mother-in-law, they actually got mad at me because they wanted it to be Francine. I suggested we name her Valerie with the middle name Francine, or Francine with the middle name Valerie, but they weren't happy with either. During my last month of pregnancy, my husband has become more angry with me. I finally snapped and said that I wasn't going to name my child an ugly name that I don't like for the sake of a woman that doesn't even like me. He said that I was being unbelievable and that I had insulted his strong, independent mother. I immediately apologized, but he left to his mother's house. 2 days later, I couldn't reach him at all, and on the 3rd day I went into labor, Kate kept saying she would text my husband, and I told her not to bother. After hours of labor and awful pain, I gave birth to my baby girl and named her Valerie with Diana as a middle name. Diana was my mother's name. About 2 hours after I gave birth, my younger sister was able to reach my mother-in-law to get the message to my husband. When they came in, my husband was raging and yelling at me, calling me a pretentious, backstabbing bitch, and mother-in-law was more upset about the name. I think this might be the end of my marriage, but we can still change her name if I really wanted to. So, am I the asshole? Should I just change the name?
Am I the asshole for not attending my sister's wedding since my husband is not invited? Let me start by saying I do understand my husband's behavior is inappropriate, but like all of us, he's not perfect, and I took vows to him to stand by him and accept him as a whole person, including his flaws.
Wow, she's really leading it up.
Yeah.
So my husband has for urinating on himself in public. I think
No.
I think it's the humiliation aspect. So sometimes, not every time, we get together with my family, he will pee his pants. But overall, it's not really that disruptive. He just stands up and says something like, quote, "Oh no, I've peed myself." Then he goes to the bathroom and changes. I always bring a change of pants and underwear for him in case this happens. And when he gets back, we just move on and don't talk about it. So we've told my family he has a medical condition that causes him to not have full control of his bladder. I told them the reason he doesn't wear adult diapers is that he's ashamed of needing diapers at his age, so he's basically in denial that he needs them and refuses to wear them. Well, now my sister's getting married, and she says my husband can't come because she doesn't want him disrupting the wedding by peeing his pants. I told him it was unfair to exclude him over a medical condition he can't help, which is true as far as she knows, but she said it's his own choice to refuse to wear adult diapers, so it is his fault. I told her it's her wedding and she can invite who she wants, but if my husband isn't invited, I'm not coming. He loves my family, and I know it really hurts him to be excluded from the wedding just because of a he can't help having. He's been crying, but he can't control himself, and now my family doesn't even want him around. He told me it's my choice to go if I want, and that he won't be mad, but I know he'd be really sad if I went. I love my sister and family, but my husband is my life partner. So I told my sister I won't make it to the wedding, and now she's extremely angry with me, saying I'm a bad sister because I won't be there to support her. She's marrying a woman, so she also said it makes it look like I'm a homophobe if I don't show up to support their union. I told her I'd love to come if my husband is invited, but she said she can't stand the thought of him disrupting the ceremony or reception by peeing his pants and denouncing it. I told her how much it hurts my husband that he's excluded, but she doesn't care. I said, fine, but that means I can't come.
But he can't control it? Like, he couldn't be like, I'll take the wedding day off. You know what I mean, Dustin?
That is a good question, and not one I am qualified to answer. I don't know. I think, like, if you get to a certain point of that, like, maybe, like, once you're so far gone in, like...
How are you guys so chill about this? This is fucking weird, dude. I've had problems with my mother-in-law long before I gave birth last August, but ever since then, it's been an utter nightmare. When I first came home from the hospital, we went to stay with my parents. Big mistake in general, but she insisted on being able to stay there too, as it wouldn't be fair for my parents to get all the time with the baby and not her. My mother-in-law had boundary issues before the baby was born, but after, it was and still is awful. She wouldn't listen to any rule that we put in place. Constantly kissing my 40-year-old baby, not giving me time alone to even breastfeed or pump. It had gotten so bad that my PPD had become so exasperated that I wasn't eating and I was crying constantly. My husband tried to constantly get her to stop, but eventually we had to just kick her and by extension brother-in-law and his grandmother out and send them back home. Now that you have some background on the type of person that she is, it brings us to yesterday. My dad usually watches the baby during the week, which irritated my mother-in-law to no end because it wasn't fair even though she lives an hour and a half away from us. So after harassing us for months, we finally broke down and allowed her to watch the baby every Wednesday at our apartment. Well, yesterday I was about halfway through my shift at work when I get a phone call from my brother-in-law. He never calls me, so I knew something was up immediately. Apparently my mother-in-law called him in hysterics that she dropped the baby and was scared that she was seriously hurt. She called my brother-in-law, the one who lives an hour and a half away with her. I quickly hung up and tried to call her 7 times with no answer. I called my mom since she lives closer and she immediately went over. At this point, I'm frantic and running to grab my coat when I get my husband on the phone. I explained the situation and he's livid, but his shift was also thankfully ending much sooner than mine, so he was able to leave an hour early and shoot home. He finally got her on the phone, but when he did, she was completely undone and he couldn't understand a word that was being said, so he flew home. My husband and mother got there at the same time to find my mother-in-law sobbing on the couch and thankfully perfectly fine, except for a bruise and a cut under the eye, 6-month-old who was in her bouncer laughing at her grandmother's tears. Everything was figured out and the doctors were seen and we sent mother-in-law home. Here's where I might be the asshole. My mother-in-law called me to try and explain, but I cut her off and told her she could no longer watch my child. And yes, I had already discussed this with my husband. I told her that if she cannot handle an emergency, then she cannot handle my infant alone. She is now inconsolable and telling everyone who will listen that we're never allowing her to see our child again. Am I the asshole for telling my mother-in-law that she's no longer allowed to watch my daughter? We were at a wedding 2 days ago. A friend of ours was getting married. Many of our friends were also invited since we're all a huge company and we know each other. At some point, the girlfriend's partners' wives of the guys were left alone at the table and we kind of chatted and left the rest of the men to have some space on their own. So this guy's girlfriend, that guy is also a friend, was with us at first, but after a while she got up and started going around her boyfriend. She would not leave him alone and me and the other woman found it extremely disrespectful how she kept following him around and not giving him space. So I called her name and told her to approach me for a bit. I kindly told her that she was being disrespectful by following her boyfriend around and not giving him space to spend time with the other men and how she should sit down with us instead. She said, "Thanks, but I'm okay, don't worry about it," and left again. I followed her and told her that she's looking like a clown for following her boyfriend around like a lost puppy and she better act serious and sit the fuck down with us. That's when she got all pissy and told me to mind my business and how this doesn't concern me. Then her boyfriend came to me. Again, her boyfriend is also a friend of mine and told me that I was out of line for trying to police what his girlfriend does and where she goes. He told me that she has social anxiety and it's one of the few public and crowded events that she's attended in a while and doesn't do well with strangers, which is what we are to her. I told him that I was looking out for him in case she annoyed him by following him around and I just thought that he should have some space. He told me that I should have minded my business and not to get involved. Am I the asshole for making fun of a guy's girlfriend for following him around an event the whole night? Me, 34, and my husband Hunter, 37, suffered from fertility problems. We recently decided to get a surrogate who's a friend of a friend. We were busy getting everything done legally. We already had a contract in place. My egg was used, so no worries in this regard. Plus, our surrogate is a respectful, kind woman who's been keeping her part of the contract intact. But it's Hunter who started acting strange. I've noticed that he's been focusing all his attention on our surrogate, like skipping work to visit her or get her things that she didn't ask for, chat with her all the time on social media, and also constantly offering to do things for her like drive her to places and sometimes even invite her out or offer to prepare stuff for her. She complained to me about this and even told me about things that he's been doing that I didn't even know about, like bringing her gifts. I tried speaking to him about what this looks like, but he said that he's doing what he's doing for his son and not her. Still, I asked that he tone it down and respect the woman's space. He got mad at me and accused me of being jealous of the woman who's carrying my own child and said that this makes me look bad. I said our surrogate was the one who complained about his behavior and he said that this wasn't true. Apparently this made him somewhat angry, so I gave him time to cool down a bit. Yesterday, our surrogate called me saying that Hunter came over and told her guests to leave. I asked why and she said that he wanted to show her the $9,000 car that he bought for her. I was shocked. She said that she declined the car and asked him to leave, but he started arguing with her about using public transportation and risking our baby's well-being. I was fuming and I called him demanding that he get home and he eventually did. Once he got back, I picked up a fight with him and yelled at him saying that he's been nothing but overstepping, disrespectful, and inappropriate towards the surrogate. Again, he explained that the car wasn't for her but to ensure the baby is safe. I told him to stop disrespecting the woman and stop using the baby as an excuse to stomp all over her boundaries. He ranted about how he was just trying to make this work and I should do the same if not more. He even accused me of not loving our son as much as he does, but this is in the way and putting $9,000 on a car without telling me. He left the house for a while and then he came back and refused to speak to me. I might have been hard on him. He might have just been oblivious, so I'm less sure seeing his reaction now. Am I the asshole for telling my husband to stop disrespecting our surrogate? This last week, me and my wife just finished a major project to redo our entire dining room. This included buying an incredibly fancy marble dining table and new dining chairs. My wife is a professional chef and has dreamed since she was a child of having a high-end dining room to host dinner parties in. This project has been one that's been on the back burner for a while now, and last year I got an unexpected bonus that I decided to use to make this dream a reality. Suffice to say, my wife is over the moon. To celebrate this, her parents, my 2 siblings, and my brother's wife are coming over for the dinner party my wife has dreamed of hosting since she was a child. This is all of our immediate family except for my wife's only sibling, her sister, and her husband. The reason for this is simple. My brother-in-law physically cannot attend the party as we have it planned. My brother-in-law is 500 plus pounds. To avoid the whole fat shaming conversation that I know this will bring up, I'll talk about why we didn't invite him. The chairs that we bought cannot support him, and even then, he is unable to sit upright due to his weight for long periods of time. He would require to either sit out in the living room on the couch or to sit in a medical chair that we cannot get into the home. It will not fit through our doors. Him sitting in there would literally defeat the point of hosting a dinner party for our new dining room. There's also the fact that this dinner party would consist of 7 smaller courses, something we know my brother-in-law would not be okay with. There have been incidents in the past where he harassed my wife over serving smaller portions in the past. This goes into a larger issue with him and food that I'm not going to bring up because I don't feel like arguing about it. With all of this in mind, when we sent out the invites, we excluded him from the list, but not her sister. When he called asking last night as to why he wasn't invited, I did not lie to him. It was because of his weight and his past actions regarding food and my wife. He lost his mind because we were excluding him because of his weight. He said this is unfair and that we were being bigots. I told him yes, this is about his weight. That this night is about my wife and being able to fulfill her childhood dream, not about accommodating him and his mobility and food issues. This has caused a shitstorm. My wife's sister is now calling me a fatphobic asshole and has gone on Facebook and publicly shamed me and my wife. While my wife and everyone attending the party has told me that we should just ignore it, my friends have told me that I'm a major asshole and an elitist for all of this. Am I the asshole for not inviting my 500+ pound brother-in-law to our dinner party? My wife and I had our first child around 2 months ago. She was home isolated during her entire pregnancy after the 6-month mark because of some pregnancy complications. We had also agreed that the first 2 months after birth, our parents and siblings would be the only ones allowed to visit and see the baby, and our friends and the rest of the relatives could wait. As soon as the baby turned 2 months, my wife started trying to get back into her social life again. Sometimes she'd bring the baby with her, but sometimes she'd expect me to babysit. Whenever I couldn't babysit, she'd call her mom and ask her if she could care for the baby for a few hours. My wife's a great mom and she truly cares for our baby, but it's frustrating how she feels the need to go out the entire time. One day while she was out shopping with a friend of hers, I was babysitting the kid and my mom visited me and asked where my wife was. I told her that she's out with a friend. My mom got very mad about how my wife went out and she told me that I have no backbone for not calling her out and telling her to stay home with the baby. I told my mom that I'd handle it. My mom waited until my wife got back home and she started scolding her. It wasn't a proud moment of me and I really didn't want my mom to get involved, but my wife needed to hear from someone else too. My mom told my wife that she's irresponsible and that she should cut down the meetings with her friends and stay home to care for the kid as a proper mother would. My wife tried to defend herself by saying that I was always out with my friends both during her pregnancy and after she gave birth, but both I and my mom tried to explain how me going out is not the same as her going out. My mom told her that the little walks and coffee hangouts with her friends are over and that she better get used to the fact that her social life will now be limited. It sucks, but that's how it is. I agreed with my mother on all that and my wife is not speaking to me for days. She even sleeps in the guest room now and took the baby's crib there as well. She'll only cook for herself and the baby and not for me. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law have texted me saying I was a huge asshole for this and so was my mom, so I shouldn't be surprised if my wife is acting like that towards me. Am I the asshole for siding with my mother when she and my wife got into an argument? My boyfriend, 27, and I, 26, have been together for 2 years. He has a good heart and is normally rational, but his one issue is that he expects to come to me in every occasion no matter how big or small. He even went with me to my ex-boyfriend's funeral after days of begging. Now, my best friend got married a few days ago. It was very small and only close family and friends were invited. My boyfriend couldn't come because of the +1 rule. He pitched a hissy fit saying that my best friend had no respect for my relationship and was shocked when he learned that I was still going to attend. He told me that if he can't go, then I'm expected to not go as well. But that's my best friend and I had to respect her rules. He gave me an ultimatum, either we go together or I stay home with him. I ended up going because again, I respected my friend's rules. He was angry with me and kept calling me the entire 2-hour drive, then stopped. Later, I got a text from his friend telling me that he, my boyfriend, got into an accident and was taken to the hospital. I freaked out and he gave me the address and I had to leave the wedding and told my friends why. I was crying the entire drive home and kept calling his friend but got no response. I arrived at the hospital and asked for my boyfriend and they checked and told me that he wasn't there. My anxiety reached 160% as I kept calling his friends one by one. I just went home and there he was, along with his friend. He saw me and said that he was sorry, but this was the only way he could get me to come home after I left him alone. After the initial shock, I just blew up yelling at him about lying and making me leave my friend's wedding and having me literally go to the hospital and freaking out because of him. I kicked his friend out and we got into an argument. He kept talking about how much I love him, thus I left, which is my own doing and not his, and that he was just trying to see if I really chose my friend's wedding over him. He then argued that my friend caused this and I shouldn't agree with her to exclude him. I said what he did was horrible and I called him horrible and then went to my room. It was awful because my friends kept calling to check in on him because they thought that he was really in the hospital. He said I overreacted and then I yelled at the wrong person. Did I go too far? Am I the asshole for yelling at him for making me leave my best friend's wedding? Storytime about how I got back at my cheating ex. Back in high school, I, now 25, had a long-term boyfriend who I became sexually active with. Legal age here is 16. However, his parents were in ignorant bliss, though I'd always assumed that they knew. They came across some suggestive messages and lost the plot. Literally printed them out and came to my house, so both families got involved and they insisted that we break up. My family was surprised at their response due to how long we'd been together, over a year at that point, but as adults agreed, it was their choice to make that rule for their son. Their son, however, took this opportunity to continue a secret relationship with me while proclaiming, unbeknownst to me, to be single to everyone else, including other girls. I was blissfully unaware thinking that we were still together, but just couldn't tell his parents, until he slept with one of my classmates a few times and he got back to me. I publicly slapped him, embarrassing cringe in hindsight, but also called his dad and said calmly, if you don't think your son should be having sex, you may like to counsel him against sleeping with both me and other girls at the same time. It may result in more than just a slap from the next girl if he also refuses protection with her too. His dad went wild and had 100 questions. Apparently after the family intervention, my ex had convinced his parents that we just fooled around and didn't go all the way. So I told him it had been going on for months and that he used to sneak me into his bedroom at night too. They took literally every single thing except his mattress out of his bedroom. They also moved their whip house so he couldn't climb down it to sneak out of his window. Our city was a major holder of sports events and he was a huge fan, would go to every game. The season had just started and he was banned from attending any of them despite having saved up for the tickets. He wasn't allowed to leave his house except for school until the end of the school year, which was 5 months. No phone, no internet. I only found out because he borrowed his friend's phone to text me and abused me for shattering his life. I guess it does seem pretty life-shattering at the age of 16 or 17. Then I dipped town anyway and left the wreckage behind, as my family was moving. Yeah, his parents were clearly overboard about it, but damn, it felt good to take away so much joy after all of his lies and cheating. Imagine your parents leaving you with someone they thought they could trust, only for you to end up being tortured by the entire neighborhood. In July of 1965, Sylvia Likens, 16, and her younger sister Jenny, 15, were sent to live with a woman named Gertrude Beniszewski. Sylvia's parents were in desperate need of money and joined a traveling carnival. They promised Beniszewski $20 per week to take the girls in. Beniszewski already had 7 children of her own, so what's 2 more? Little did Sylvia's parents know, this would be the last time they'd see their daughter alive. At first, the payments were on time and Sylvia and Jenny fit right in. Jenny had polio and wore a leg brace, so Sylvia did the chores for both of them and took care of her. The problems began when the payments for their room and board was late. Gertrude started beating the girls with paddles. One day in August, the girls were beaten 15 times because Gertrude's oldest daughter told her that the girls had overeaten that day. The abuse quickly escalated and poor young Sylvia became the focus of Gertrude's wrath. It's thought that Gertrude, who was 36 at the time, and her eldest daughter Paula were jealous of Sylvia's looks. Gertrude would starve Sylvia, followed by force feeding her until she'd vomit, then forced her to eat the regurgitated contents. She once struck Sylvia so hard across the face that she broke her wrist, and then when the cast dried, she used it as a weapon. Slowly, Gertrude got her children to join in on the horrific abuse followed by the neighborhood children. She encouraged them to use Sylvia as a dummy and practice martial arts on her. As more children joined in, Gertrude gained popularity and the violence became more extreme. At one point, she forced Sylvia to strip and use a glass bottle on herself in the middle of the living room for the neighborhood boys to watch. By the end of summer, Sylvia was forbidden from attending school and held captive at home. Because of the continuous cruelty, Sylvia had become incontinent. This angered Gertrude and she had Sylvia tied up naked in the basement on October 6th. Poor Sylvia was then subject to burns, beatings, verbal and physical sexual assault, and etc. She was also given very little to eat and forced to wet herself and use dark corners of the basement as a toilet. Word spread in the neighborhood amongst the children and they would pay 5 cents apiece to come and see Sylvia for themselves. The broken, scarred, and burned body of a teenager was a sight to behold for a curious child. Neighbors would later recount hearing screaming coming from the house until 3 in the morning at times, but in those days, no one wanted to intrude on others' household affairs, so no one came forward. Even Sylvia's older sister, who was told twice by her and Jenny about the abuse, thought that the sisters were exaggerating and did nothing about it. It seemed like everyone was turning a blind eye. However, for Sylvia, the horror kept escalating. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, the girl tortured by an entire neighborhood. After holding 16-year-old Sylvia Likens captive in the basement, Gertrude Beniszewski's heinous acts continued at a greater rate. Gertrude, her 7 children, and the neighborhood kids would help Gertrude restrain Sylvia as she received scalding hot baths and cuts, where Gertrude would rub salt into her wounds and sores. On October 23rd, they branded her stomach with a hot needle, saying, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it." Once finished, Gertrude's 10-year-old daughter tried to brand Sylvia's left breast with a heated bolt that had an S on it. Sylvia knew that she was dying and even told her younger sister that she didn't have long to live. She tried to escape on October 25th but was caught by Gertrude before she made it to the door. The final day of Sylvia's life was different than the previous months. She was delirious and couldn't speak. She was fully incontinent and Gertrude's 12-year-old boy hosed her down with cold water while laughing at her. Even in her weakened state, she made one final attempt at escaping before Gertrude caught her at the basement door and stomped on her head. In her last hours, she was given a warm bubble bath, changed into clean clothes and laid on the mattress. She closed her eyes and never opened them again. Days earlier, Gertrude forced Sylvia to write a letter claiming that she had run away and the boys from the neighborhood were her torturers. Her last attempt at deflecting any blame was to cover Sylvia's body in rubbing alcohol. When police arrived, Gertrude told them that Sylvia had returned home in her bloody and dying state and that she had been trying to nurse her. Everyone was questioned, but no one was talking. No one except Sylvia's 15-year-old sister, Jenny. She told police, "You get me out of here and I'll tell you everything." Gertrude, 5 of her children, and 5 of the neighborhood kids were all arrested for Sylvia's murder. Her autopsy showed 150 wounds, some down to the bone, and she had also bitten through her lips when she died, almost detaching it from her face. Gertrude and her eldest daughter Paula were sentenced to life in prison. However, both of them were released on parole later on. They both changed their names and went on to lead new lives, but Gertrude died in 1990 of lung cancer. Jenny, Sylvia's sister, went on to marry and have 2 children of her own. She spent years on medication due to anxiety from watching her sister's torture and murder. 2 movies have been made based on Sylvia Likens' story, one called An American Crime and the other called The Girl Next Door. That's actually how I heard about this case. Both movies are heartbreaking though, so please take caution when watching. Because of this case, if anyone sees any type of child abuse in the state of Indiana, they are required by law to report it. I'm 25 and my husband 42 have 3 children, a 2-year-old son and a set of twin girls who are 3 months old. We live just down the road from my parents. I have 4 older siblings that all went to college, but I didn't. I'm the only one with kids. All of my family got together for Christmas last year. Whenever I try to engage in a conversation with my family, they seem to just ignore me. My relatives would hold our babies but not talk to me much beyond that. I was so alone. I was late in my first pregnancy when we got married. A few of my siblings had gotten married before I did and they all had very nice weddings with lots of guests. No one had any interest in coming to mine. We trashed the idea of a wedding and got married at the courthouse. I couldn't even get all of my siblings to attend the little ceremony. We couldn't go on a honeymoon at the time, so I was even more miserable. Recently, my sister told me that our family thinks that I'm just a dumb bimbo with no goals in life, so I had babies instead. She says that's why no one values my input or opinion. They think I'm stupid for having children young. My children were not planned. They also think that I'm stupid for being with a man older than me, but he's my one true love. They don't want me to have any influence over large family decisions because they think that I'm dumb. They ignore me and don't make time for me. How do I get them to take me seriously? I'm 43 and have a 22-year-old daughter. All my daughter's life, she struggled with mental health issues. She has ADHD, bipolar, and borderline personality disorder. If I'm being honest, I never really understood a lot of my daughter's disorders. I've always approached mental illness as something you just bury deep down. And as a single mother, I've tried to do my best, but I know that I'm not perfect. Well, recently, my daughter asked if I go to one of her therapy sessions with her, and I only agreed to it because she seemed super excited about it. When we got there, her therapist first asked me how I was raised to think about mental health. I said I wasn't raised to think about mental health at all. She then said that she guessed that. It seemed kind of snarky, but I ignored it. She then asked about my family's history with addiction and mental issues. I denied any, and then she started to list all the things that my daughter told her and asked if they were a lie. They weren't a lie, but I never saw any of these things as big issues. She then began to explain to me BPD is a trauma response. She explained it can be caused by many things, but by me invalidating her emotions so much like I was invalidating my own had a part to play in it. She then tried to tell me ways that I can cope with my own trauma so that I can help my daughter cope with hers. After listening to her spew absolute garbage for 30 minutes, I finally got up and told her that she was a fucking quack and didn't know anything that she was talking about. I just stormed out and left. My daughter called me crying an hour later and I told her that she needed to get an actual therapist instead of that bitch. I wasn't upset with my daughter, but I did feel like she kind of threw me to the wolves. After cooling down though, I think maybe I could have handled that wrong, but I'm not sure. Am I the asshole for snapping at my daughter's therapist when she tried to blame my daughter's trauma on me? My wife is a cancer patient. She unfortunately started losing her hair due to chemotherapy and she's been incredibly insecure about it, her lack of hair in particular. She got a wig and started wearing it. I don't mind it. I 100% support her since she only wears it around family and friends. Now my sister lost her apartment after a messy divorce and moved in with her twin daughter, 16, almost a month ago. Things have been going well except for my niece's constant remarks about my wife's wig. They got so hung up on it and kept asking lots of questions about it. They asked to take turns trying it on, suggested that they straighten it with their straightener and so on, which was exhausting. They even pressured to see her without it, but my wife was uncomfortable and refused. Yesterday I got home and found that my wife is locking herself in the bedroom and crying. I asked her what happened. She told me that she woke up and didn't find her wig and then discovered that my nieces took it and hid it and urged her to come out so that they could see her without it. My wife repeatedly asked them to give it back, but they started laughing and recording. My wife had to lock the door to keep the distance because they didn't stop. I was fuming and went to the kitchen and confronted them. They acted confused, but I was able to get the wig back. I lashed out telling them that they humiliated my wife and embarrassed her by taking her wig. They said it was just a lighthearted prank, which made me go off on them. My sister got involved and said that my wife was just being sensitive and the girls were just curious to see her without her wig, but she overreacted. I told her that her daughters were recording her. She saw nothing wrong in it and said that I overreacted as well. I lost it on her too and told her that she and my nieces are no longer welcome to stay at my home and they needed to leave. I later let them know about the eviction since they thought I wasn't being serious, but they started crying and begging that I let it go. However, my wife is no longer comfortable around them after what they did. My sister called our elderly dad and he begged that I let him stay and insisted my nieces were just acting like typical teenagers. He offered to speak to my wife, but I declined. They've been begging that I change my mind, but I kept refusing. Am I the asshole for evicting my sister and her daughters after they hid my wife's wig and embarrassed her?
Tender touch, drunk love, staying up just to talk to you. You stayed in touch, 2 continents, through all odds. Seems every night, yeah, all the time I'm calling out to you. Seems every time I take a drink.
I grew up as a fat kid, but when I got to college, I began taking control of my health and I lost 150 pounds. I had a personal trainer who is now my husband. He was a huge health nut to begin with and really kept me on track and held me accountable. I've been able to keep the weight off for 20 years and we're both giant health nuts. We have 3 kids. Our daughters are 12, 14, and 9. We've always been strict about health with them. They each have a workout machine in their room which they have to use for an hour before dinner, and if we walk in and they aren't on their machines, they get their phones and toys taken away. My 2 oldest girls have rebelled against this a lot. We've also been really strict with nutrition. We never had anything but fruits, veggies, and lean meats in our home, not even bread. At birthday parties, we took them home as soon as the cake and pizza came out, never took them trick-or-treating for Halloween, and had teachers send them to different rooms when they had class parties with food. We also told their friends' parents not to feed them junk. I'll admit, we definitely sheltered them from junk food in fear that they grow up unhealthy. People thought we were ridiculous for the way we raised our kids, and we were warned about them having eating disorders, but we thought we were doing what was best, and everyone was being ridiculous. 3 months ago, we found out our oldest daughters, who go to the same middle school, were sneaking food at vending machines from school with their allowance cash. My husband found out about this from hearing the snacks in their backpacks and had a long talk with them about the dangers of eating those snacks, and took the snacks and their money. I heard him talking to them, and he was gentle and calm about it, but both girls ended up in tears. Recently, we got a call from our 12-year-old daughter's school counselor. Apparently, she's been chewing up her food and then spitting it out and making herself throw up in the bathroom when she ate lunch. They also talked to me about my 14-year-old who said that lately she's been skipping breakfast and lunch a few times a week for the past couple years because she was scared we would be mad at her when she ate. The counselor was not happy with me and recommended a treatment place for eating disorders. I feel like absolute shit. Like we've caused our daughters to have eating disorders and have to look out for signs for our 9-year-old. I called my mom for help and instead she berated me and called me a piece of shit mom, which was the last thing that I needed to hear. My parents are taking my girls for a couple days while I get everything together and set things up with the eating disorder treatment place for when they come back. I don't know what to do. I feel proud that I didn't raise my kids with junk food addiction and I put their health before their tears about not eating pizza, but now it's come at a price. I've been unconsolable and my husband and I aren't talking right now as we don't know what to do. I have 3 daughters, Alyssa 18, Tessa 16, and Jenna 14. We rarely argue. She drives her sisters around and she works full-time while in school. The only problem is that she can be unreliable. If you ask her to get groceries and be home by 5, she'll call you at 6:30 and ask you what you wanted her to do. And she doesn't do housework without being reminded 5 times. She has ADHD though, so that explains it. Now Jenna loves to argue. Jenna argues with my husband a few times a week. She's a pretty good kid otherwise. She's a straight A student, she plays soccer and is playing softball, and she helps around the house more than both of her sisters combined. Tessa is complicated. When she applies herself, she gets straight A's extremely easy. The problem is, she never does her homework, so she usually gets B's and C's. She and I have similar hobbies, and both my husband and I love talking to her when she's in a good mood. We don't fight often, but when we do, it's very dramatic. She's been insisting that she has ADHD or some other problem since she was around 11 because she can't focus, but my husband and I think that she's just trying to get shorter assignments and extra time like Alyssa. We got into an argument the other day because she has IBD and gets infusions every 6 weeks. She's very strict about never pushing it back for any reason after we tried to push it back once because we were going to be in another state and she got sick at 6 weeks and 3 days. It was 2 years ago and she's healthier now, but she still refuses to push it back. Her next infusion is scheduled for the 1st, but we're going to be on vacation from the 30th to the 4th, so I scheduled her infusion for the 8th. Her doctor approved it, but she started yelling at me about how last time I pushed her infusion back, she got sick and she isn't going to risk her health from our vacation. It became a very long and drawn out argument. When I picked her up from school, she put her headphones on so that she wouldn't have to talk to me, and then she locked herself in her room. She borrowed my laptop, so I looked in her backpack to see if she still had it. While I was looking, I saw passes from the school therapist. Tessa knows I don't want her talking to those therapists because people will find any reason to call CPS. Tessa admitted that she'd been seeing the therapist once a week for 2 years. She wouldn't look up at me from her coloring book and started crying and asked me to give it back because her therapist gave it to her for when she was having a bad day. I ended up shredding it and she hasn't left her room except for school and hasn't spoken since, so I want to know if I was the asshole. So, am I the asshole for shredding my daughter's coloring book? I, 24, have been with my fiance, 24, for 7.5 years. We started dating our senior year of high school. He has always said that he was waiting to propose until we had enough money for a wedding. I always told him that I would go to the courthouse or have a very small wedding. He was the one that wanted a big party. There was also his family drama that held him back because he was hoping to mend his relationship with his family before getting married so that they could attend. Long story short, he finally realized that his parents weren't going to be civil and they are no longer in our lives. I began anticipating him proposing after that. He finally did this past Christmas. It felt like we were finally moving forward with our lives. After he proposed, I realized I did indeed want a real wedding, though still something small. He again was trying to make it bigger than what I wanted or what we could afford. He said that we should be celebrating our lives together after all the pain and drama we had put up in our lives. So I began planning a wedding. My father works at a private golf course and they offer to use a venue for a fraction of the cost. I don't have the exact numbers yet, but they waived the site fee, $5,000. I get all the enhancements for free, which is a $2,500 value, and I don't have to have their minimum person count. We're essentially paying for the food and drink and will still be given a discounted price. On top of that, my grandparents and parents are planning on chipping in. I really imagine my fiance and I only paying about $5,000 out of pocket for DJ and attire. And I plan on having people gift money for a house instead of items for wedding gifts. To me, this wedding is important and is a dream wedding that I thought I'd never be able to afford. But my fiance thinks that we should scrap it all and focus on buying a house in the next 2 to 3 years. But that we could get married at the courthouse, even though it was his idea for a big wedding. And maybe have a wedding after we buy a house. So to me, this means that I won't have a wedding for another 5-ish years, and who knows if my dad will still be at this job or have this amazing offer. Am I being unreasonable for wanting this wedding? I'm 16 and my stepbro is 16, we'll call him H, and my dad 44 and his mom 33 started dating 2 years ago and married 1 year ago. They also moved in with us a year ago. My stepbro and I go to the same school, we're both in year 11, however we're polar opposites. I'm upper middle class, pretty slim, popular, devout Catholic, well-behaved, etc. And he's working class, quite chubby, atheist. He's also popular, however he's your typical working class punk teen who has been arrested multiple times and constantly misbehaves. The school we go to is in northern England and is overwhelmingly working class, so it's a miracle that I've managed to fit in. Now to the point. Since they moved in, my dad and stepmom and my 2 youngest step-siblings have converted to Catholicism. However, H has refused. He said he was raised atheist and refuses to convert to Catholicism. This creates alienation in our family with him being the odd one out. A lot of the time he's out sleeping on his friend's couch or he's completely confined to his room because my dad and stepmom always pester him about his religious beliefs. They try to force him to convert to Catholicism by threatening consequences if he doesn't go to church. However, nothing has worked. Today, we were in English class. I'm in the same form group as H, and H was talking about how my dad nicked his mom and turned her into a religious nutcase. He also spoke about how he resents both my dad and his mom for trying to force him to assimilate to the church and alienating him just because he doesn't want to. I pretended not to hear him. However, I secretly wrote everything he was saying down with the intention of showing my stepmom and dad. When I got home later that day after school, I usually always get there before him because he's pissing about with his mates most of the time. I showed stepmom and dad what he had said. They were both livid and rang H up demanding that he come home immediately. When he got home, dad and stepmom shouted at him and demanded that he come to their room to talk. I put my ear on the door to listen, and they told him that he was no longer allowed in the house and disowned him. That was a bit harsh in my opinion. However, when H came out, he didn't look fussed at all, and he said that he'll just go sleep on his friend's couch. He's been gone for a couple hours now, and his stepmom and dad have received a lot of backlash from his aunt, uncle, cousins, extended family, etc. on my stepmom's side of the family. So he must have gotten in touch with his extended family about the incident. I have mixed feelings about this because I feel guilty for getting him kicked out. However, I think that stepmom and dad deserve to know that H resents them and dubs them as religious nutcases. Am I the asshole for getting my stepbrother kicked out of the house? My husband, 33, got into a car accident almost a month ago. He's been bedridden due to the back injury, and I've been his primary caregiver. The pressure has been too much for my mother-in-law. She keeps telling me to take care of him and be there for him constantly. She begged me to take time off of work, and I did, and asked me to send her hourly updates about his condition during the first 2 weeks. But when I don't, she'd get mad and cause an issue. She visits every day but doesn't do anything to help. Alternatively, she lists things that I should or shouldn't do. The family keeps telling me that she's just worried sick for her son, so I try to stay calm. Days ago, she called to berate me about not replacing the sheets quickly. I had no idea how she found out since my husband didn't call her. I was stunned. However, my sister-in-law called me to tell me that her mother had installed a camera in the bedroom to see if I was taking proper care of her son. After searching the room, I found the camera. I called my mother-in-law and had a huge fight with her. She admitted to it and said that she was just feeling concerned and wanted to make sure that her son was being cared for, despite him calling her every day. I yelled at her, telling her that she's no longer allowed in my home after this. She lost it and went on a rant about how I'm stopping her from seeing her son and that not seeing him will literally make her sick. The family called me later to get me to back out of the decision, but I told them that she breached my privacy and took advantage of the situation. They said I'm taking it too personally and that I can't blame a concerned mother for wanting to make sure that her son's fine, especially since she listed the things she thought I was doing wrong. I ended the conversation, but my husband is upset, telling me that I'm being vindictive and that if his mom can't come, then he'll move in with her. We argued, then I went outside and he's been silent ever since. Am I the asshole for banning my mother-in-law from the house after I discovered that she installed a camera in the bedroom?
Am I in the wrong for blowing up at my husband for lying to me about kicking my sister out? My sister is 20 and has just got out of a terrible relationship with her partner and has a 5-month-old son. She's dealing with lots of issues, including depression, and it was actually my husband's idea for her to come and move in with us. After about 2 weeks, my husband was complaining about the baby crying and about my sister just being there in general, even though she helps around the house. We had an argument about it, but he told me to just forget it and that he was being insensitive. Not long after, I had to leave town for a couple of days without my husband, and I returned and my sister's no longer there. My husband told me that my sister's gone to live with a friend instead and gave me a letter that was supposedly from her. The letter seemed a bit off, so I called her straight away. She told me that my husband kicked her out and told her that she's no longer welcome and should take responsibility. She explained that she is actually staying at a shelter and literally has no money. Go to part 2. Okay, this is part 2. So I waited for my husband to get home and literally blew up at him. He admitted that he faked the letter but said I'm unfair for taking her side. I told him that I'm going to pick her up because I don't want her to be homeless at a shelter with my 5-month-old nephew. He told me that he'd changed the locks and that I'm not allowed to bring her home. He said that I'm letting her affect our lives, but she's my sister and I don't know what to do. I get that it is also his house, but I don't know why he's so against her staying with us. Am I in the wrong? Am I in the wrong for refusing to accept 50% custody after my children wanted to leave themselves? I, 35 female, have 3 children with my ex-partner, 37 male. We have always shared 50-50 custody since our youngest daughter, who is 7. Recently, he has asked me for 100% custody and of course I refused it. The children were with their dad when he asked me this, and when he returned them to me for my week, they accused me of kidnapping them. They were playing up the whole week that they were with me, so I agreed to give my ex-partner custody and I would of course pay child maintenance. I moved to a new house. I kept in contact with the kids but started living my best life. My partner had a new girlfriend that the kids seemed to love and they seemed to be really happy. It wasn't long before problems started to arise and my ex was struggling with things like bedtime and schoolwork. Both my ex-partner and kids were begging to return to 50-50 custody, but I refused. He's saying he can't discipline them, but this is what they wanted.